in their home opener in week 2. And so, Mike T, we'll go to you first here. When you look at this Cowboys schedule, and we'll put it back up in a minute, what do you think is the most important game for the Cowboys this year?
November 5th at the Eagles. It's easy for me, Shae, because if they can beat the Eagles in Philadelphia, they can win the division. And let's be clear, it's razor thin between the two teams. Over the course of 17 games a year ago, the Eagles outscored the Cowboys by 10 points, and the Cowboys gave up 2 less points than the Eagles did. They were 1-1 in head-to-head. The difference in points in those 2 games combined was 3 points. So these are 2 heavyweights standing toe-to-toe, regardless of what the perception may be. And if Dallas can draw first blood, so to speak, and win on their opponent's turf, they can win the NFC East this year.
So my game is a couple weeks before that, the true measuring stick in the NFC. Who's going to contend to push the Philadelphia Eagles? Is it the Cowboys or is it the San Francisco 49ers? They play San Francisco October 8th, 2023. It's time, guys.
Everyone go through Dallas. That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, and going back to Courtney's point for a second, I agree that San Francisco is right there and a meaningful part of this conversation, but winning the division is just so important for Dallas because if they can get Philly at home in the playoffs, that's a huge difference because Philly has such a home field advantage, and that's why those division games. And here's the other interesting thing, we're, 5 hours away from this deadline with Saquon Barkley, and that opening game, Giants and Dallas, I'm scared to death if I'm the Giants and I don't have Saquon Barkley for training camp because even if he comes in and he signs week 1, he may not play, he may hold in, but there's going to be a lot of information we'll know at 4 o'clock today that we don't know right now that could really impact Dallas' season because if they can win on opening day, get a division win, and then for their sake, hopefully beat the Eagles in week 9, they're really in a good spot to go win this division.
Well, I'll say this. History on the Cowboys side, as we know in the NFC East, it feels like no team wins it in back-to-back years. That hasn't happened since 2003, 2004 with the Philadelphia Eagles, and they obviously won it this past season. So maybe the Cowboys actually have a shot.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas beat the Giants both times last year. Really didn't feel like either of those games were in question. So I think it's the obvious answer. You want to start out week 1 with a win. But I look at this schedule. There's a lot of winnable games for the Dallas Cowboys this year. They've got Arizona on the road. They have a New England team that doesn't have DeAndre Hopkins. You know how we feel about that here at First Take. And then Carolina, Washington, and even Detroit. There's 4 to 5 games that you can say, okay, I'd favor Dallas in these matchups. But the rest of their schedule is an absolute monster. They've got the New York Jets in week 2. They have to go to San Francisco, that game I mentioned, in October, and then the Los Angeles Chargers right after that on Monday Night Football. This schedule's a behemoth for a team that's trying to prove, hey, we can take that next step. This offense is better around Dak Prescott. Dak isn't going to throw 15 interceptions. Mike McCarthy might be the difference maker as the play caller. And, oh, by the way, they still have one of the top defenses in the NFL. You can't take days off, and I know that that's probably the most cliched thing to say in the NFL, but when it comes to this team, when it comes to their expectations, and when it comes to the blunders, that's what they are, what they've had in the postseason the last 2 seasons, getting through the biggest hurdle, which has been the San Francisco 49ers, that's the measuring stick they need to know, okay, we're a legitimate playoff team, or we're probably a wild card exit.
And they have that bye week 7. That's early for the Cowboys to really do they even need to refuel at that point?
Well, listen, as a player, outside of seeing who you're playing the first week 1, you always want to know when is the bye. Yeah. When is the bye week? Week 7, that is an early bye.
That's too early.
That is absolutely an early bye. But again, for me, Mike T. Listen, you always talk. Coach Belichick used to always talk about divisional games. They count like a game and a half. That is hugely important. But ultimately, it's all about the number 1 seed. Win the division, trying to acquire the number 1. Make everyone go through Jerry's world. If that happens, can you imagine the conversations that we're going to have in football season if somehow, some way, the Dallas Cowboys force the playoff path to go through Jerry's world?
It's where you really can tell his value and how efficient he is as a runner is the forced tackles, missed tackles after first contact, and then his yards after contact. To me, that's where his measure in an offense and what he's able to do, how elusive he is, how slippery he is, what he brings to this offense, That's the consistent element you got from him last year in a career bet on yourself sort of year for him. He was in a contract year. He thought that was going to help him get this big deal. We'll see what happens by the time the deadline rolls around today. But as far as like the other names, and of course we've got to talk about Saquon Barkley here because he is also waiting to see if he gets a deal this afternoon. Feels like two sides are, a little further apart than maybe they would have liked. I don't think that you can put any of those other names above where Josh Jacobs is right now and what he's proven in a relatively very healthy career over the last couple of years.
It's hard to debate that, Damien. What do you think?
Yeah, well, for me, I'm going to go with Tony Pollard. And the reason I say Tony Pollard is because I think out of the three backs that we're talking about, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, and Tony Pollard, I think he gives you a different element in the passing game. And we saw that with the Dallas Cowboys last year. Even, running the football, obviously you saw the juice and explosiveness he had, as opposed to Ezekiel Elliott. But you saw the value that he brings in the passing game. And for me, when we're talking about a passing league, having a running back that you can utilize, that you can split out and do certain things with and create a lot of mismatches in the passing game, that's something that I think is just it brings another element to your offense. So Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, obviously we know what they account for as percentages of their respective offenses, but I love Tony Pollard and what he brings in the passing game as, quite honestly, like another receiver out of the backfield.
Yeah, to me, though, it would be Saquon Barkley. This is a guy, when you talk about someone that completely elevated what that team was a year ago, heck, he helped his quarterback get a long-term extension, helped a first-year head coach get pushed over the threshold in terms of the Giants and Saquon Barkley. Talking about overcoming adversity, he has done that, and it looks like he's done it almost with ease. In the fourth quarter, Saquon second only to Nick Chubb in rushing yards last season, obviously top 5 in rushing. Can get through defenders with the quickness. Every time he touches that ball, it feels like he's going for a first down or a score. Good things happen when the ball is in his hand. I love Saquon Barkley. Again, we are hours away from this deadline. And all of us, you obviously play, Courtney and I cover the sport very closely. Holdouts to me don't feel like the biggest deal as long as we're not talking about this in late August. In July, if you want to hold out and get what you feel like you're used to and maybe not be there for the start of camp, especially for some of these veteran players, is it really that big of a deal?
Well, I mean, now, the way the CBA is structured, it's very hard for these guys to, really hold out. Now they do what's called the hold in, where they essentially will sign their tag. Once you know that, you can't get a long-term deal, you sign the tag, you go in, and then you make it be known that I'm not going to go out here and practice every day, as a franchise player. But listen, I think the Giants are in a pickle here. If they don't get Saquon Barkley signed, this is a guy that accounted for over 40% of their offense.
Exactly.
Over 40% of their offense. Daniel Jones only threw 15 touchdown passes all last year. So you talking about a guy that possibly comes in and he's not, you didn't take care of him, and then he comes in the training camp angry. What if he doesn't play week 1 against Dallas?
Stop.
And that's it's a realistic possibility. And that's not just him playing that card and posturing. I really think that could be something that he uses to get his deal maybe week 2, week 3. If they lose that opening game to Dallas and you see how bad that offense looks without Saquon Barkley in the mix, the Giants are going to have to reconsider here. Why would you want to lose the momentum that you had 1 year after having 4 wins 2 years ago? They get to the playoffs last year. They get to the divisional round with Saquon Barkley in the mix. Why would you want to squander all of that away in the name of not paying your best player on offense?
But if we're saying this, why haven't they been saying? This is common knowledge. You don't want to get to the first game of the season and have your star players sitting out so that everyone can see how bad they are without.
This is about guaranteed money.
This is just a depressed running back market right now.
That is.
I mean, that's just what it is.
And the holdup here is the guarantees. I mean, you take a look at the deal that DeAndre Hopkins signed after he was franchised in 2020. Does not sound like that $25.5 million in total guarantees is anything close to being what's on the table.
Time is a tick because I feel like the closest thing to a rivalry for the Chiefs wouldn't even necessarily be the Raiders. It would be the Bengals at this point. However, I guess I'm not the one playing quarterback. Mike T, which NFL rivalry do you think is most like college?
Shae, this one's easy. It's Dallas and Philadelphia because it's a generational rivalry that goes back decades. Regardless of their record, these teams can't stand each other, as we're watching right here. And you could throw out the record books. Somehow Dallas wound up in the East going back decades, and it's a rivalry that will transcend, like I said, generations. And you go back to the Ron Jaworskis, the Roger Staubachs of the world. And what's really fun for me now is Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott, barring something unforeseen, will carry this for the next 10 to 15 years as well.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.